Hi, folks. This is Attorney Kip from Malek, and today we'll be discussing an update to the calculating your C92 application or award in 2024. So, first, let's discuss what is a C92 award, otherwise known as a Permanent Partial Disability Award. So, workers' comp, unlike a personal injury case, a workers' comp case does not contemplate non-economic damages. So in a workers' comp case, you're only going to be pursuing recovery of economic damages, and that'd be in the form of compensation and medical treatment. In a personal injury case, you could pursue what's called non-economic damages. And one of those non-economic damages would be pain and suffering. So a C92 award is the closest analog in workers' comp to a pain and suffering award. And if you want to think about it this way, before the work injury, you were 100% healthy or perfect. After the work injury, you're some percentage less than perfect. So let's say before the work injury, you're 100%. After the work injury, due to the allowed conditions in your claim, you're now 90% perfect. So for that 10% where you're no longer perfect, you're going to receive, again, the C92 award. What is it not? So it's not a settlement, and it is not permanent total disability. So permanent total disability compensation is a completely different type of compensation. It's a whole different kit and caboodle. I've talked about in other videos. You can watch those videos to learn more about what permanent total disability compensation is. And it's not a settlement, and the confusion kind of arises due to, well, the next question: when can you file a permanent partial disability award or C92 award? And if we go to the Ohio Revised Code section 412357, they lay it out here: not earlier than 26 weeks after the date of termination of the last period of comp, or 26 weeks after the date of injury or occupational disease, whichever is later. So, and what ends up happening in the typical way that a C92 award is paid is the individual is receiving temporary total compensation for a period of time. Then they're found to have reached what's called maximum medical improvement, or MMI. And after that point, after you reach MMI, you're no longer entitled to receive what's called temporary total disability compensation. And so that is when the clock starts ticking for most people as far as the C92 award. So once that person's found MMI, then 26 weeks after that, they could file this C92 award application. And the confusion about it being a settlement likely arises because, again, you're no longer receiving comp, or you haven't been receiving at least temporary total compensation for 26 weeks. It may very well be that your medical treatment has abated because you're found MMI for the allowed conditions in your claim. And so it seems like, okay, what is this thing, 26 weeks? It's about a half a year after your comp stopped, and then you get this lump sum of money. It isn't, but nevertheless, it's not a settlement. It's just another form of compensation you're allowed to receive pursuant to the allowed conditions in your allowed workers' comp claim. So that is what a permanent partial disability award or C92 award is. So how do you calculate it? Okay, first you're going to need some bits of information. The first thing you're going to need the date of injury. Easy. You're going to need to know your average weekly wage. And then you're going to need to look at the percentage permanent partial max rate for the year of your injury. That's why you need the date of injury, which you can find on the workers' compensation rate sheet. And then fourth, you're going to need your the actual PPD award rating percentage that you're granted, either by the BWC per a BWC permanent partial disability award order, or at the Industrial Commission. So how can you find your AWW? Well, if you don't know your AWW, this is one way to find your AWW. So if you've made an e-account, which everyone should do, you could do so on the Ohio BWC website. But if you go to, you should have something called additional resources, And if you click on that to My Claim, it's going to give you this front panel, which you can see here. Obviously, this information is redacted. But if you go down to the quick links at the bottom, you may have this. I don't know. You might not have this. But if you do have it, the settlement research, it'll show your AWW. Your AWW will also be found if you go in your claim documents and you look up wage calculation. There'll be a wage calculation worksheet if it's a state-funded claim, and it'll explain in that wage calculation worksheet what your AWW is, your average weekly wage, and what your full weekly wage is. If you're a self-insured, if your employer is a self-insured employer, that information may not be available in the claim documents. You might have to call your risk management rep or TPA, third-party administrator, and say, hey, what's my AWW? You'll need your AWW in the comp rate sheet. So you have your AWW, and then your comp rate sheet, you need to look at the year of the injury, and then you go over, and you're going to look at, see where this PP maximum is. You're going to go look. So let's say it's 2021. You go over, you're under the 2021% PP maximum for that year is $339.67. Okay, so if you got injured in 2021, that would be the percentage permanent partial max. So you'll need that information, and then obviously you need the percentage that you're awarded. So let's go through some real simple examples, calculations. Okay. Oh, and how to actually calculate it. Well, first, step one, you got to calculate your percentage permanent partial rate. And so what ends up happening is if you take 66% or 6.667 of your average weekly wage, you times that to your average weekly wage, and if it's above that maximum percentage permanent partial rate for the year of the injury, then your percentage permanent partial rate is the max rate. So if you do your calculation for, again, 2021, and your 6.667 of your AWW is, for instance, 341, then for your calculation, your percentage permanent partial max will be 33967. Otherwise, your percentage permanent partial rate will be whatever that calculation is, meaning it'll be 0.667 times your AWW, and whatever that product is, that will be the rate that you use. The second step, you're going to get your reward, your percentage permanent partial award percentage, and whatever percentage you're granted, you're going to times that times 2, because for every percentage point, you get what's 2 weeks of permanent partial disability comp. So simple, take your percentage times 2, and that's how many weeks of percentage permanent partial disability comp you'll get. Step 3, take the number of weeks that you had in step 2 times your actual percentage permanent partial rate in step 1, and the product of that is the amount of permanent partial disability compensation you're going to receive. And this is paid in a lump sum, and reminder, again, this is not a settlement. Okay, so that's how you calculate it, and now we're going to get to the examples. And it's a pretty simple math problem. Once you get, probably the most complicated thing is finding this compensation rate sheet, and I'll put a link to this rate sheet in the description for this video, so you could go click on that, download it, and then you have it. Also put a link to the Ohio Revised Section Code 412357, so you can actually read the code section that gives rise to this award. But again, it's pretty simple calculation. So we'll go example number 1, Joe's, the date of injury is 2020. So we're going to look at the chart. So 2020, the PP max is 326.67. So that is what I got right here, 326.67. For this individual, his average weekly wage is $15.34. I've had other videos that discuss your average weekly wage, and I've also videos that discuss raising your average weekly wage, which is important, which you'll see why in another example. But so this guy, his average weekly wage is $15.34. The actual percentage he received was 5%. So we got to figure out his rate first. So 0.667 times 1534 is 102.3.18. This is far greater than the max per percentage permanent partial rate for 2020. So his percentage permanent partial rate for Joe is 326.67, the actual max rate for that year. He's got 5%, so 2 times 5, he gets 10 weeks. And then easy peasy, 10 times 326.67, his total award is $3,266.70. So that's example number 1, Joe. So we got Rachel. Same deal. She looks at their date of entry. We look at the chart. The max percentage permanent partial for 2018 is $310.67. Her AWW is $430.05, and the percentage permanent partial awarded was 10%. So we do that first calculation to figure out her rate. So 0.667 times $430.05 is 286.84. This is less than the max percentage permanent partial rate for 2018. So her permanent partial rate for Rachel is that product, 28684. She has a percentage permanent partial award was 10. So 10 times 2, she gets 20 weeks. And then take the product of the number of weeks times the percentage permanent partial rate, and then you get her award, $5,736.80. So easy, right? Super simple. Steve, date of entry. Again, we look at the chart for 2022. So we go over to dates covered 2022. We go over to that percentage permanent partial maximum that says percentage PP maximum go down 2022. It's 36167. And then his AWW is 53973, percentage awarded 4%. So again, do that simple problem. 0.667 times 53973, 360. That's less than the max percentage rate for 2022. So his percentage permanent partial rate for Steve is 360. And if you notice, it's only $1 or so less than 36167. So, which was the max permanent partial rate for 2022. So that's his rate is $360. His number of weeks he receives, again, 4% times 2, he gets 8 weeks. And then we just take the product of the number of weeks times his percentage permanent partial rate, and then that's he gets $2,880. One other thing to consider with, again, not a settlement, but the other thing to consider with this and any other form of compensation you receive besides living maintenance, which you get through vocational rehabilitation, is it's non-taxable income. So you don't pay tax on this award. So Steve is going to get this $2,880 tax-free. Okay, the next example is an example of why it's incredibly important to get your AWW as high as you can, and you'll see why with the example of, well, actually I think it's the fourth example, but for here it's labeled number 3. So just read that as number 4. Elizabeth. So date of entry is 221. We look at the rate chart and it's 339.67. So what's unique about this example is look at her average weekly wage. It's $15, right? So her percentage permanent partial award is 62%. So if with that percentage, that suggests that this individual had a fairly significant injury, was very badly injured, has a number of conditions allowed in the claim. And, generally this would be a good award, but the AWW in this claim is so ridiculously low, $15, that it's going to have a major impact in the amount of money she gets. So 0.667 of $15 is roughly $10. this is less than the percentage permanent partial rate, and that's supposed to read 2021, but, or yeah, and I think I put the date of injury of 2022, but what did I, so 36167, and then what did I do, 339, yeah, so it's 2021. That's supposed to read 2021, but nevertheless, so the percentage permanent partial rate for that Elizabeth is $10, which is not good at all. Far below the max permanent partial rate for her year of 2021. And it really, frankly, it doesn't matter what the max permanent partial rate, because she's not going to hit it. If you look even at this chart, I think this chart goes down to 2010, and they have earlier ones. But even the lowest amount in this chart is 25833. So she doesn't even hit that. And I bet you go all the way, I don't know, to 1950 and maybe, or 40 or something, and maybe then that would be the max rate of $10. You know, when maybe in the 1800s, before workers' comp in Ohio existed. Nevertheless, massive percentage permanent partial disability award of 62%. And so what, you know, you do 62 times 2, she gets 124 weeks of comp, and you do the calculation of 124 weeks times the percentage permanent partial rate of $10. So her award is $1,240. That's really kind of not good at all. And that's why the asterisk, why it's incredibly important to your AWW as high as possible. Not only does that have an impact on the amount of temporary total disability compensation you receive, but it has a massive impact also on your percentage permanent partial disability award. Again, I've done other videos about how to calculate that, or how to raise your AWW. So you could watch those other videos, and I'll either put like a link in the description where you can click on those other videos. But there's ways that you could get your AWW, get it raised. If your AWW is low, definitely look into doing that. So these are just fictional examples. I'll just go through and show you what actually, like how this actually happens. So once you file your C92 application, what's going to happen is the BWC is going to reach out to you, and they're going to schedule what's called a C92 examination with their C92 examiner. And so example 1, obviously all the identifying information is redacted, but this individual, this is the BWC's report. This person's, the allowed condition in this claim is, as you can see, a displaced fracture of shaft of third metacarpal bone of left hand. And so what they'll do is they'll generate this permanent partial disability examination report, and you could kind of see what they're talking. They're talking about the history, the chief complaint, and then they're going to do a physical exam, and they're going to look at medical records as well. And then they use what's called the AMA guides to evaluate the permanent partial impairment. And it doesn't really look like they did a huge, really involved examination, and maybe it's because this person is totally healed, and it's kind of, I don't know, it's kind of pointless. But nevertheless, they did the physical exam, and then they determined what their WPI, or what their permanent partial impairment, and they say permanent partial impairment of 1% of the whole person, so WPI. They use the AMA guides, got 1%. So that's what the BWC examiner, and what will happen is the BWC will issue a BWC order awarding 1%. You appeal, and then what you would need to do is, you could, if you so chose to do so, or your attorney chose to do so, is have you examined by another examiner. And so for the same claim, this individual was examined by somebody else, and you could see it's a little bit more involved. Compare that exam to this exam, and it looks like they're doing range of motion findings, and you'll see they're doing all these observations, grip strength testing, and then they come up with these different impairment ratings. And what they're going to end up doing is, you know, they look at the finger, because I assume that's what the particular body part that was fractured, and they're doing different range of motion testing and documentation of what's going on. And you can see, you know, it looks like they're at least on extension of 0%. And then they're going to come up with all these numbers, and they using this, they have this combined values chart, and they come up with a percentage whole person impairment. And then the other thing they might do is, if you notice right here, they combine the left wrist and the left third finger impairment, and they get an 8% WPI. And then they also, for pain and limitations of activities of daily living, that's what ADL stands for, they give them 3%. So in total, 8 plus 3 is 11. And then, so this person was given by this doctor 11% WPI. So what ends up happening is, when you've appealed that BWC order, it gets referred to the Industrial Commission, and then essentially and here's the thing with these type of hearings, usually we never have the claimants participate, because the claimants there's no testimony that they could give. It's purely based upon these examinations, and that's one consideration. The other issue is they're fairly quick. And so there's a little bit of, of negotiating and argument of why you should follow this report versus that report. So we would argue, hey, use a higher number, and the employer or the BWC would say, we want you to rely on the lower number from the other report. And then the hearing officer makes basically a reasonable compromise between the two reports. So again, if you look, this guy, the first one was 1%, this individual was 11%. So the hearing officer veered, they gave 4%. So that would be a period of 8 weeks, right? So that is the award. If we weren't happy with, this is a DHO, if we weren't happy with it, then, or we didn't have medical yet, then we could appeal that and then have a second hearing, a staff hearing, or by a staff hearing officer. And then, so we do that same calculation that we did in the examples, and then that's how you'd figure out how much this individual would get. So you're getting that percentage either from the BWC order or from the Industrial Commission hearing order. Okay, so that's a real world example of how this works out. And I think these are actually, yeah, and going to that front panel, doing the settlement research, I think this is this individual. So they have their AWW, they look 80804, and then they could take that and, you know, calculate what they're going to get. So they know the date of injury. Well, they know the date of injury. You don't, but they do. And then they have their AWW, and then they have their percentage. And so they could calculate how much money they're going to get. Okay. So here's another real world example. This person's claim is allowed for a soft tissue condition. So it's I guess a strain of a left knee. And they're evaluated by whomever this BWC doctor is. And if you notice, it's a little bit more involved than the other one. It looks like there's a little bit more documented. But this person gave 0% for the actual physical examination. So they found 0 impairment for due to the strain of left knee. And that's not unreasonable, because if this person's MMI for these conditions, you know, this might be if a strained sprain is a soft tissue condition, you would always expect, you would expect some of these things to heal, but they do give a pain impairment of 1%. So their total award is 1%. Okay. BWC issues their order, we appeal, we get this individual examined by our own person. Again, allowed for a strain of the left knee, and there's the history, current complaints, and that's where he or she, whoever this C92 examiner gives us 3% for the limitations of the ADLs, the activities of daily living and pain. And then they do the left knee exam. You know, they're doing the examination, they're looking at all these things, they're looking at range of motion, and then they're using their their AMA guides, their impairment charts, and they're coming up with, they're combining all these numbers from the physical exam, and they get a 10% whole person impairment for, based upon the physical examination of the left knee, and then they gave 3% for pain and limitations of the ADLs for a total of 13%. So how did this turn out? And I think this is similar. I think it's the same thing, 4%. So notice again, 1%, was it 13%? And then again, reasonable compromise was reached of 4%. And again, there may have been an SHO. We may have appealed this and gotten a higher percentage at the SHO, but this is the DHO. And that hearing officer determined between the two orders that this person was entitled to a 4% permanent partial impairment. And if you look, it's only allowed for a soft tissue of the left knee. So it's, you're going to get these bigger awards when you get more significant conditions, when the person's off for a bit longer period of time and these sorts of things. And unfortunately, in the workers' comp world, the reality is the more valuable the claim is, has a kind of a relationship to the seriousness of the injury. So we all want to have low value claims because that means we're not injured. It's unfortunately, the higher value claims again mean a more significant injury, and that individual obviously would need that money and that treatment. And again, with all these injuries, I always would prefer that everyone is not injured, because getting injured is not pleasant at all, and it has major impact on people's lives. So nevertheless, so this person got 4%, and then again, going to that BWC front panel, going to settlement research, we were able to look, and you can see there's a few disallowed conditions. It looks like they're, I don't know, sprain is disallowed. So it was allowed for a strain, but for whatever reason, disallowed for a sprain. I don't know. Sprain seem like they're the same condition to me, but nevertheless. And the other thing is, you can see total medical paid out in this claim is $1,000, which tends to correlate to that this person may have had an emergency room visit and maybe a follow-up visit or two, and then their total indemnity, which may encapsulate the C92 award, is $1,989. So not a serious injury, not a lot of money received, because that's how the BWC, that's how these things are calculated. Their AWW 483, again, if you look, everybody's AWW is going to be different because everybody makes different amount of money, but this person, their AWW is higher. Their C92 award is going to be higher, even though they got 4%. They both got 4% award, but they also, you have to consider the year of injury. But this is going to be lower because their AWW is lower. So when you do that when you calculate the percentage permanent partial rate, it's obviously going to be lower. So again, we want that AWW to be as high as possible. There are ways to get your AWW raised. I've talked about those in detail in other videos. Watch that, reach out to your attorney and have that discussion with them about that. So this is an updated video about how to calculate your C92 award or permanent partial disability application. As always, if you have questions, concerns about anything, either email me or call the office or leave comments in the comments section. Otherwise, if you don't want to talk to me, call up any kind of competent workers' comp attorney in Ohio. If they've been operating in it, you're going to know who those people are. Ask your friends, your coworkers, who they recommend. Ask maybe your doctor, hey, I need an attorney. Do you have anybody you recommend? And then go with who you trust. Call one attorney, call multiple attorneys, and they find the person that you're going to get along with, that you vibe with. But workers' comp, particularly in Ohio, is incredibly labyrinthine and complicated, and it's going to pay dividends to get somebody involved. Thank you. Bye. Attorney Kip Malek.